Olafur Arnalds, Janus Rasmussen, together, Kiasmos. Don't you just love how Kiasmos combines orchestral symphonic elements with downtempo electronic elements and merges that into a seemingly new style of music? Orchestral downtempo, whatever you may call it, it sounds lovely. So you want to know how it's made? Let's dive into the video. This project was inspired by their track Blurred. You can also grab it using the link down below. I remember starting off with the piano because that's the main element. Our chords sound like this. You can see there's a chord progression over here. I decided to color these chords differently because every couple of bars they chose to add a couple of notes. If you're interested in what chords I used for this project, I also added a PDF to the download. You can also see them here. Or you can grab a part of the track where only the piano is playing. For example, this part over here. Cut that using Command or Control E. Right click the section and convert harmony to a new MIDI track. So after that, it's going to load a bit. So then Ableton gives you something like this. So you get an estimation of what the chord sounds like, and then you can readjust the notes here. You can also transpose the notes to a different scale, but for now we're just going to close this off. Because this is the main element of the track, we want to pay attention to how it sounds. We want a sound that is really soft and mellow. How do we achieve that? So there's this piano plugin for Contact called Noir Felt. It's an incredibly beautiful piano that was sampled by Native Instruments in collaboration with Niels Frahm. And the reason I chose this piano for this composition is because you have the option to enable noise and the pianist sound. So you actually hear the pianist clamping on the piano, which is really, really organic and adds so much of a more human feeling to the track. But in case you don't have this piano plugin, I also resampled the individual notes into this rack over here called the Iceland piano, which you can also get off my website. You can also mess around with the individual parameters from this plugin over here, like the attack and the delay, as well as the reverb. Add some highs. It's a pretty cool recreation. Might as well check that out. The original sounds like this. And our recreated version sounds like this. Nice. Piano consists of a couple of different layers, as you can see here. We have our main piano, which is Noir. We also have our piano noise layer, which sounds like this. So basically only the touch sounds from when the piano's played. This is the Una Corda plugin from Native Instruments as well. You also have the option to mess around with these textures like cotton, silk, curtain. I think I chose cotton for this. You can also change it to silk. And you get these different sounds, different mechanical sounds, which add so much of an organic layer to the already existing piano. So in combination with the piano noise, it sounds like this. Touchy. As you can see in this section, we added some high notes to the piano layer. So it sounds like this. And a bit of variation to the sound over here. And that basically plays throughout the whole track. Cool. After the piano, I went into adding some strings. The strings that you can hear in the intro, they sound like this. This over here is the Novo plugin by Heaviosity. It's also a Contact library. It's an amazing string plugin. Basically just two notes playing with each other. The A and the C. With the piano, that really fits well. I also resampled this layer into another plugin called Iceland Strings, which you can also find on Lotus Tunes. This is the recreation. This is the original. So they basically sound pretty much the same. And it's a really fun plugin to mess around with as well. Cool. So feel free to check this one out as well. So we have our strings and our piano. And after that, I went on into creating the drums, the chord drums. And for that, I like to start off with the kick. And with the individual layers, it sounds like this. So there's a lot of texture to the kick. First layer is an 808 kick, which sounds like this. Decrease the amount of sustain here. Change that to -23 dB. Get a much shorter kick, like the original track. Then I have a high layer over here. Reduce the attack. Also transpose the sample down a bit. So these two layers sound like this. It's a bit more texture that we have in our kick using these high frequencies. I also added some retro color originally, just to see if I could add some more dirt or grit to the sound using this noise and distortion panel. With retro color, it sounds like this. Sounds pretty cool. What I did after that is I resampled that noise into a new layer called kick noise, which sounds like this. I added some reduce ambience to take out some of the frequencies that I didn't like, and EQ8 as well. I also added a couple of fades to the sound so we don't have that initial kick transient here. And after I did that, the kick sounded like this. And the last layer to our kick is this high kick noise, which sounds like this on its own. Just added a bit of EQ to clean up the sample, take out that muddy low end and reduce some of the highs. And I also added the shifter plugin to pitch the sample up a bit. So originally it would sound like this. With shifter, it sounds like this. Now it matches the key of our track. So the kick in total sounds like this. Don't you think it's much more interesting to have a kick with these individual texture layers with a bit of noise and grit to make it sound more organic than just having a simple 808 kick like this? Might as well make it sound beautiful like this. Cool. In the original track, you can hear a tom groove that plays alongside the kick, which on its own sounds like this. The sound that I use for the tom is the exact same sound that I use for the kick. So it's this sound here. The reason it sounds different is because I added some processing afterwards, taking out some of that low end and the high end. So we have a band pass filter, mainly focusing on the mid-range of the frequencies. And I did some cleaning up over here. And I also increased the attack so it doesn't sound so clicky and interferes with our main kick. You can also see that I drew in a couple of different notes to get a bit more tonal variation within the tom. So our toms in combination with our kick sound like this. Our next element is the clap. The clap consists of 1, 2, 3, 4 different layers. And our reverse clap all together sound like this. Layering claps is a really great way to get the sound that you want. So every individual clap takes up a different space in the mix. Some claps are better in the low end range, some claps are better in the high frequency range. This clap over here, for example, which is more of a rim shot, takes up the high frequency range. And this one, the even higher frequency range. So we have an equally filled out clap throughout the entire frequency spectrum. And this reverse clap, the way I created it is just I hit Ctrl T to create an audio track. Hit resampling, record input, and recorded my claps into this new layer over here. And I zoomed in a bit, took a small section of the sound over here, hit R, reverse, and just set my clap sample to where I wanted to have it, like here. So our claps in total sound like this. Since this would be a bit too intense, I'll shorten the sound down, reduce the volume, change it a bit over here. You see, that's where we get that pre-shift effect. And then I'd add this manually before each and every single clap, and I would change the way it would sweep in just by a tiny bit each time. So this one sounds different as well, like this. So you get that different pre-shift effect each time the clap hits. It's a really, really nice way to add more texture and diversity to your claps. We already have our core melodic elements and our core drum elements established. This is how it sounds. Lovely. After that intro, we get a small break where we filter out the kick and only play the piano. Small vocal sound in the background as well. And then comes our drop. So now we not only have our kick and our clap, we also have a couple of different percussion layers that are coming in to assist the fullness of the drum groove. The first layer would be this tonal percussion sound over here. Then we have a bongo sound here. Then some loose shakers. Some main shakers. A hi-hat that plays with every kick. Another percussion loop. And some fill percussions in the background. In total, our percussion sounds like this. And it really goes well with the drum groove that we already have. This tonal perk was originally created using this sample over here, which on its own sounds like this. I just put it into this Razer step sequencer that you can also find for free online. I hit slice mode, readjust the transients to my liking, hit randomize, so it gives me a random sequence of notes. And on its own, it sounds like this. Resampled that into a new layer over here called Tone Perk, added some EQ8 and some reverb, and had this really nice tonal sound that fit to our track. This bongo sound is a simple bongo one-shot from my Daydream Organic House Pack. Also added some shakers. These shakers originally sounded a bit more loose, but I did decide to make them a bit more snappy using this beat warp mode, preserve every 1/16th note, hit one shot, and drag the sample down here. So it's a bit tighter. Then we have our main shakers over here, reduce some of the high-end frequencies over here. I also added this hi-hat, which plays together with the kick to give it some more energy. Just a bit of a white noise shaker sample. Together with the kick, it sounds like this. Without the hi-hat, it sounds like this. This is a really good technique to just add a bit more energy to the kick in the drop. And for this percussion loop, I just cut up a sample, added some EQ to reduce some of the low end, reduce the high end frequency so we only have the mids. For the fill perk, the background percussion, I also went into the sample, hit this button over here to get into the automation panel, utility, gain, and I also automated the gain so that the sample only plays to certain sections over here. You can also see that I completely shifted down the samples here using the shifter plugin here. Just to get a completely different tonality to the percussion sound. Let's get back to the hi-hats. Hi-hats sound like this. You can see there's one really short layer here. Just a transient, and you can see there's one really long layer over here, which sounds like this. Just a simple shaker hat from the Daydream Organic House Pack, shifted down a bit. Just to get a different tone. And in the context of the whole mix, it sounds like this. Just adds a bit more high frequencies to the mix. So those are the drum elements in our drop. And this is the original vocal sample that I recorded in the studio here. Just applied a bit of EQ, take out the low end frequencies, add a bit of high dampening, some reverb and some delay. Really simple processing. Came up sounding like this. Also chopped the vocal sample up, added some variations here. You can see this is pitched down one semitone. Cool, so that is a pretty cool vocal fill that we can add every few bars. In the second part of the drop, you can hear a bit of cello action going on, which sounds like this. For the high cello layer, I used Novo strings again. On their own, they sound like this. Pretty simple sound. For the low cellos, I actually used the library called Spitfire Symphonic Strings. They sound like this. Again, don't worry if you don't have these sample libraries. I also included a resampled version of the strings inside here. The cello high sounds like this. Together with the low strings that I resampled, they sound like this. One of the most beautiful parts of the track is this arpeggio over here that plays along with the other elements of the drop. I mean, that sound alone just gives me goosebumps already. This sound is actually an Ableton stock sound, and it's called Saw Pure Muted Bass, and I think it's analog. So if you type in Saw Pure, go into instruments, yeah, you can see it under bass, Saw Pure Muted Bass, analog. And if you mess around with the pitch of the sound and add an arpeggiator on 16th, you can come up with really nice arpeggiated patterns like this. You can also change the arpeggio style. And if you don't have any inspiration for MIDI, what you can also do is use some MIDI from the Daydream Organic House Pack. Let's say we're going to use these chords over here. Just add them in. Just by adding in some chords, testing around with the different variations, the pitch, you can come up with really, really beautiful sounds. For this arpeggio, I just added some EQing, removed some resonant harsh frequencies around 1K, also removed the low end because we don't need it in this sound. Some auto pan for some extra movement. I added some reverb directly onto this layer with a bit of decay, and some EQ, clean out the mud frequencies from the reverb, which is why I call it this reverb cleaner. And finally some delay, just to add some more bounciness to the notes. What a beautiful sound. Awesome. Later on in the drop, you can hear this subtle distorted lead sound coming in, which sounds like this. In the entirety of the whole mix, it sounds like this. It's really subtle, but in the break part, you can hear it actually getting louder. This preset also comes with Ableton Live. It's called Disto Lead. So if you search instruments for Disto Lead operator, there's an operator preset called Disto Lead. So you can drag that in, mess around with the individual filter presets, the wave amount, the drive amount. And I find these sounds to be really cool if you want to have like a drone in the background or something that assists the melodics of your track. And for this sound, I removed a lot of the low end, as you can see here. Removed the resonant frequencies around 1K. Some reverb, some overdrive for distortion. So adding overdrive after your reverb gives the reverb a bit more crunchiness. So the reverb goes into the distortion, the sound that comes out is much more dystopian and sounds a bit more crunchy. So without the overdrive distortion, it sounds like this. With it, definitely sounds a bit cooler. After that, I added a bit more EQ to clean the sample out even more, and removed some of those harsh resonant frequencies here. And I also added the delay automation right before the drop hits, just to get that tension sweep. We also have some ensemble strings that play towards the end of the track, which sounds like this. So for the main part of the strings, the ensemble, I used a plugin called Spitfire Albion 1, which is also an extension for the Contact library. I love using this plugin because it just sounds so incredibly full. You can get like this really orchestral feeling simply from this plugin alone. And if you don't have the plugin, I also resampled it to audio over here. In addition to the ensemble sound, I also have this cello solo sound that comes with the Contact Factory library. So once you purchase Contact, you also get this sound called cello solo. Just make sure the sustain is on, the dynamic release is on, and other than that, I didn't really tweak any parameters. You can see I did a ton of EQing, cutting out the low end, reducing that mud around 300 Hertz, taking out the high frequencies, and a bit of that mid-range frequency around 1K. Also added some EQ8 to take out those harsh resonant frequencies around here. So those were all of the elements that we used in our track. Let's get to the mastering. So the first step of our mastering would be to cut out the low end frequencies. Everything beneath 35 Hertz is not necessary in our mix. Also went into MS mode. Hit this button over here and reduce some of that side frequency from the bass until 100 Hertz. Did the same for the high frequencies over here. Added a bit of compression just to catch the peaks. Some over the top compression to emphasize some of those high frequencies. Some saturation, about 6 dB. And since the track on its own was a bit too quiet, I increased some of the gain over here using the limiter. And as a final step, I increased the gain again using another limiter, just to get it to our loudness standard. And this sub checker over here enables me to check how loud the sub is. So our track in total sounds like this. As always, if you like this video, feel free to hit that like and subscribe button. It really does help me out and it helps me provide you more content like this. And if you like this project file as well as all the individual sounds, I'm going to provide you the links down in the description below. So feel free. All the best to you. Have fun producing. Peace. Es geht los.